Hey, this is Onesto, and today we're taking a look at one of my favorite reverb plugins for creating big, ambient, shimmery reverbs. This is Valhalla Shimmer for beginners. To explain this well, I'm going to break up this video into two sections. First, we'll go over how to get the hang of using the reverb side of Shimmer, and then we'll talk about using the shimmery side of Shimmer. All right, let's finally get to it. One cool thing about Shimmer is that you can bypass the shimmer effect and just make use of the giant reverb tails. To do that, just make sure that the pitch mode here is set to bypass. So it'll go from something that sounds like this, hear that shimmery pitch, to this. You hear how big that tail is, right? It's huge, so I want to make sure that you know how to control it. So let me show you the controls that you should be paying attention to the most. When using Shimmer, I like to keep the mix knob kind of high. When you use this plugin, I think a lot of times you'll want things to get really washed out. So usually I'm like, man, at least 60% of the mix, but usually higher than that. All right, let's look at the reverb mode down here. Reverb mode lets you cycle through 4 different reverb styles. First one here is mono, which makes the input mono and then gives you an output in stereo. Here's how it sounds. Yeah, that's a good sounding reverb there. And then next we have big stereo mode, which you guessed it, it's a reverb tail that is really big. Here's how that sounds. And then after that is medium stereo mode, which is a smaller tail that uses less delay. And then small stereo is a smaller room, which can be good for special effects moments. It's time to talk about the diffusion knob. The diffusion knob is where the reverb magic happens. Shimmer, it's a diffusion-based reverb, so the diffusion knob has the biggest effect on the quality of the reverb. When diffusion is set to 0, it'll sound like a really distinct and hard echo, like a delay. And it sounds like that because the reflection is not being diffused at all. But when diffusion is set to a really high amount like this, that reverb is going to be really diffused, and it's like you're taking your sound and giving it a soft focus. All right, and then there's a special value in here. It's 0.618, like that. This number has something to do with the golden ratio, which is like this magic ratio that occurs in nature. I'm sure there's a great YouTube video about it. But at this value, it'll take the same amount of time for the reverb to fade in as it does to fade out. So take a listen to it. I like to kind of see this as like a really good starting play, 0.618. That's kind of just like a really nice happy medium, but then I will go a little bit less or a little bit more depending on what the sound needs. To take things a step further, I want to show you some ways to shape the tone of the reverb tail. So we're going to look at the low cut and high cut knob and the color mode. So I have this plug here that we're going to kind of dial in the tone of this. So we're going to start with the low cut knob here. So the low and high cut knobs, they shape the tone of the wet signal. Try using low cut to get rid of those boomy low end frequencies. Low end frequencies, they like to take over the wet signal, especially in reverb. So getting rid of them will help the reverb sound cleaner and brighter. So focus on the low end side of this pluck in the reverb tail. Yeah, so now I'm going to low cut this. And the reverb tail itself will sound a little bit brighter and cleaner. See that? So go back to here. You can almost hear all that low end buildup. So it's really good to kind of have this low cut just to where right there is good. Yeah, I don't hear that low end buildup anymore. And then for the high cut knob, I like to use the high cut knob to help tame the wet signal. So I like to just kind of dial it in to where I think it just has the right tone. Yeah, I just think this is a real low amount, but for me, it sounds really pleasant. So I'm gonna keep it here. The next thing to check out is this color mode. There's 2 modes here. We have dark and bright. I like dark a bit more. I think it just has a more warm, vintagey, natural kind of sound. So let me just show you what dark sounds like. Yeah, I think it sounds like smoother and better. Compare that to bright. Yeah, just even when like the high cut is really like low, the bright, you can still hear like the high frequencies wanting to get through. Before I move on, if you find that you're learning a thing or two from this video, please support the channel by liking this video. Thanks a ton. Now let's get back to the fun stuff. Now let's talk about the shimmery side of Shimmer. The knob that probably has the biggest impact on that shimmer is the shift knob. Shift determines the pitch of the shimmer, and this knob is set in semitone. So at 0, the shimmer will be at the same pitch as a dry signal, so you won't really hear a change at all. Yeah, there's no shimmer in that right there. So when we set this to -12, that's an octave below, so the shimmer will be much deeper. And when it's set to +12, an octave above, you'll hear a high shimmer. Now let's talk about the feedback knob. Feedback determines how much of that signal is looped back into the entire shimmer plugin. So if feedback is really high, this results in the shimmer going either higher and higher or lower and lower depending on what the pitch shift is at. So I'm gonna put feedback to a really high amount. Here we go. The next thing to check out is the pitch mode. Fortunately, this one is pretty straightforward. So when pitch mode is set to single, you'll hear the shimmer in one pitch, which is a pitch that the shift knob is set to. In dual, you'll hear the shimmer in 2 pitches, the positive and negative value of the shift. So if shift is at 12, dual pitch will give you that 12 semitones up and also give you it 12 semitones down. Yeah, dual is pretty cool. The reverse modes are similar to the single and the dual. Sometimes you can hear that reverse, sometimes you can't. Regardless, you'll get different artifacts, so give it a shot. The last thing to talk about is a mod rate and the mod depth knob. So the mod rate determines the rate of the modulation, and mod depth determines the intensity, the range of that modulation. All this together gives a wet signal a whole lot of character. So I'm gonna put mod rate to here, mod depth to here. Let's see how that sounds. Cool, you can hear that pitch modulation happening. Yeah, I think set to here, just like this small amounts here, it's sounding quite nice. So let's compare it. Before. Okay, nice, pretty. Okay, here we go. Yeah, there's so much character when you add in that mod rate and mod depth. And that's how to use Shimmer for beginners. If you're enjoying what you're learning, please like and subscribe. It'll help other music makers find this channel. Thank you so much for watching. Later.